This morning, we have the pleasure of having an expert share with you how we can have nutritional food in today's fast-paced lifestyles. You've heard a fair amount about nutrition this weekend, and you're going to hear more tomorrow also from Sally Fallon of Western A. Price Foundation, Sally Fallon Morrell. But, you know, what good is it if you know these principles and you cannot apply them in your everyday life? Then they remain theory, like many other theories that people come across and cannot actually put it to use. Our next speaker is actually a professional chef. She has a Master's of Science degree in cooking. Folks, they have degrees in those nowadays. You know, it's actually science, it's not, you know. So, but then again, like many people, she first tried the low-fat approaches of common things that are out there, low-fat diets and tofus. But she discovered the principles of ancient wisdom eating ways of Dr. Price, and she decided to put those in a practical way, living in a fast-paced city of Los Angeles. She's now in Montana, and please help me give a warm hand of welcome to your next speaker, Hollie Greenwood.
All right, so before we can even start talking about meal planning and kitchen strategies, we need to understand why there is even a need to talk about this. Is there, in fact, a problem out there? We can assume that this topic was probably not discussed back in the 1800s. We're in a different period in history now. Different things matter to us, right? We have different priorities and a different set of problems. According to Jerry Brunetti, there is indeed a problem, and it's pretty big. Quote, "Nobody knows how to garden anymore. So before health can change, we all have to reconnect ourselves with the earth. We're going to have to learn how to grow food, how to store food, how to cook food. We have to learn a lot of things if we're going to survive. But sadly, we've given all of our knowledge away to become an industrialized, mechanized, dumbed-down society that really doesn't know how to do squat." End quote. I think that pretty much sums it up, don't you? So in 1900, the average American family spent 50% of its household income on food. By 1980, that amount dropped to less than 15%. Even worse, cooking has become a lost art. It's been replaced by the convenience factor. No surprise there, right? In 1970, the average household spent an hour a day devoted to cooking. Currently, it's only 30 minutes. Industry analysts predict that by 2030, that time will shrink to a mere 5 to 10 minutes. We've also lost our connection to food. As referenced earlier, nobody knows how to grow it anymore. In 1885, more than half of the United States population was involved in farming. In 1985, that number fell to less than 3%. So why do these statistics matter? Why do we care? Well, these lifestyle shifts have dramatically altered our health, and not in a good way. I have two goals for this presentation today. Number one is to motivate you to preparing quality food and make that a first priority in your life. The second is to show you how easy it is to eat nutrient-dense foods for each and every meal, despite a hectic schedule. I know it's a lofty goal, but I think we can do it. So we're going to do this by breaking the presentation into two parts. The first part will acknowledge the challenges that we all face in trying to make this transition. The second half will be about the steps that are needed to begin and how to create easy meal plans. By the end of the presentation, I hope that you will have become a more conscious consumer and that you feel compelled to take some action steps, no matter how small, to change how you think about food, how you prepare it, what you're willing to spend for it, and why it matters so dang much. Oh, did you do that? Oh. So this is our problem in a nutshell. As much as I love this cartoon, I find its message actually quite sad because it so epitomizes our current awareness surrounding food. Don't laugh too much. This is actually what's going on. Next. So, why is it so difficult for us to eat healthy in a fast-paced world? Let's take a look at some of the numerous challenges that we have to contend with every day. Some of these are lifestyle challenges. I've listed some of them here. You know, things are so different in the 21st century. In most households, both parents are working full-time in order to make ends meet. We have PTA meetings, kids' soccer games, band practices, other activities that make food preparation take a backseat to everything else. Our present generation's also used to microwaves, convenience foods, TV dinners, fast food restaurants, and the like. And all of these foods are readily available, right? So it makes us really less inclined to want to spend time in the kitchen. This is also the first generation where mothers haven't always cooked and don't necessarily feel comfortable in the kitchen, much less want to be in the kitchen. Another challenge, eating healthy food can seem too expensive, especially when places like Costco are so cheap. But don't get fooled by the artificially low prices. You really, there's a reason that it's cheap, and you really are getting what you're paying for. Most people feel that they can't afford to eat quality food. For those people, I invite you to come by my table after this presentation, and I have a cost food analysis handout to give you. I did this analysis a couple of months ago because I was tired of people complaining about why they couldn't switch to this way of eating. And I actually did an analysis that compares the cost of a processed foods diet versus that of a whole foods diet. And I think it'll really surprise you how well you can eat on a budget. It was amazing to me. I was actually a little nervous about doing the analysis and said, oh my God, I hope this turns out in my favor. And it did. And I was very happy. I was very surprised. So remember too that you're also going to pay a lot less for doctors and drugs later on if you change your food habits. So we also have some environmental challenges, not only with the obvious pollution that's in our air and water supplies, but electromagnetic pollution as well. We're living next to cell towers, power grids, transformers. Lots of people are getting radiation by carrying around cell phones and talking on them. And as a result, we're seeing an increase in brain tumors and cancer. Equally as damaging is the new wireless technology that's available to us in our homes, in our offices, in our airports, sometimes blanketing entire cities. These low-intensity transmissions are causing a lot of health issues of which not a lot of people are aware. So what do all of these things have to do with our discussion about food? Well, all of these new technologies have the ability to affect our energy. And when our energy is manipulated, we often don't make good food choices. We also may not be inclined to cook because we probably are feeling a lot more stressed out or a lot more fatigued. So another issue, foods are often too often manufactured commodities and not real sources of nourishment. Hint, if you can buy your food at Office Depot, it ain't food. Please, okay? Also, toxin exposure is a very serious health issue for everyone. Exposure to things like plastics, cleaning and personal care products, artificial fragrances, air fresheners, synthetic carpets, flame retardants, pesticide. The list goes on and on and on, but I think you get the idea. All of these can contribute to a person's overall toxic load. And the heavier the load, the higher the incidence of diseases such as cancer, but also the more it affects our energy and what we're willing to do and to not to do. So we also have personal health challenges. For example, significant nutrient deficiencies can occur as a result of eating refined processed foods versus those in their natural whole state. We already kind of know that. So what many people don't realize, though, is that if only processed foods are eaten for a period of time, that the body is actually going to begin to pull nutrients from its reserves in order to satisfy all of its metabolic processes. Eventually, what can happen is degeneration can set in as the nutrients are being pulled from the bloodstream first, then from the tissues, then from the organs, then the muscles, and finally from the bones, in that order. This can cause a decrease in energy. It can alter our moods. It can also set the body up for a lot of chronic disease and illness. It can impair digestion. It can make it harder to assimilate the nutrients in our foods. And all of these factors can make us less inclined to spend time in the kitchen. So lastly, we have agricultural challenges. Each and every one of these bullets that's up here on this slide affects the quality of the food that you're buying and consuming. It also puts our food supply into the hands of only a few large agribusinesses. This radically threatens our food security. This is not a good thing. In the book, The End of Food, author Paul Roberts states that by the 1980s, two-thirds of our nation's entire agriculture output was coming from less than 1/3 of our nation's farms. This is not a good thing either. So agribusiness is sort of the antithesis of the sustainability model. In a sustainable environment, we have humans, animals, insects, plants, seeds, the soil, water, microorganisms, the sun, and the air, all dependent upon one another. These all provide the nutrients and the energy needed to create a web of life that is a truly natural and sustainable phenomenon. We need this. We want this. So agribusiness is to crops as factory farming is to animals. Here we have a few photos that are indicative of a factory farming condition. On the left, we see a cow whose udder is so big from being administered growth hormones that she literally can't stand any longer. On the bottom, this cow has mastitis that can often stem from feeding cows a diet that consists predominantly of grain and corn. On the right, we have chickens who are not only confined to a building and can't get fresh air, but the conditions are so crowded that they're literally living on top of one another. As you can see, there's definitely no free range going on here. Next. So here we have animals who are living in their natural environment and eating their natural diet. Make no mistake about it, the treatment of our animals directly impacts our individual health. Just look at some of the children that we have now who are going into puberty before the age of 10. The hormones in our dairy products are definitely contributing to this problem. Other hormone disruptors are phytoestrogens, which can be found in soy products. Xenoestrogens are another. Xenoestrogens are foreign estrogens that are found not only in pesticide residues, but also that can leach out of plastics when exposed to heat or oxygen. So do yourself a favor and don't drink out of plastic water bottles, especially when they've been sitting in the car on a hot, sunny day. Next. So it's important to acknowledge all of these lifestyle, environmental, agriculture, and personal challenges that we've just discussed. They're real, and there's no doubt that they can seem overwhelming to all of us. But since our health is directly influenced by the foods that we eat, and the quality of our life is directly influenced by our health, then it only makes sense that food needs to become the #1 priority. Otherwise, what value can we place on relationships, material possessions, recreational time if we can't even enjoy this? It makes you think, doesn't it? So I understand that we're all creatures of habit. We don't always make changes easily. To make it worse, we have a lot of ongoing pressures from influences that we've been known to respect, except I'm not sure about this group, such as the medical field, the media, the government agencies. But it's important to recognize the roles that these influences play in our lives, because we need to understand that our minds don't often have the ability to discern what truly healthy is when we allow others to manipulate our thought processes. In many circumstances, the information that's being disseminated doesn't have our health in mind as much as it does for profits for those in power. And that's why it's really important for us to take personal responsibility for our health. It's absolutely mandatory if we're going to change how we think about food, if we're going to build new habits that support our health. We need to change our mindset. So how are we going to do that? Well, from a historical perspective, prehistoric man used his intellect and his skills to hunt and gather foods known to fuel his survival. It was a way for him to beautifully adapt to his environment. And his diet changed only as fast as ecological change allowed, which is always pretty slow and deliberate. In our more modern and advanced cultures, we are no longer guided by these natural ecological shifts. Instead, we are left only with our intellect to guide us in making healthy choices. But our intellect is failing us. Consumers are choosing foods based on price instead of quality. And gone is that primitive instinct that worked so well to nourish humanity for millions of years. We need to get back to harnessing that instinct. So I encourage you to change your mindset. surrounding food. Instead of living to eat, it might be better to eat to live. And for someone who's been a gourmet cook for the past 10 years and who's actually built a business around food, this can actually be a tough thing to say, let alone practice. But it doesn't mean that food can't taste delicious. It just means that we're not allowing food to control us. There's a difference there. It means we're going to be less apt to give in to addictions and cravings. Also, seeing food as medicine can also help people who are experiencing a lot of food sensitivities as well, which I believe is the result of straying from our traditional diets. So when we start seeing food as medicine, it allows us also to be a little bit more adventurous. Things don't have to be so regimented. For example, maybe you are used to eating eggs or cold cereal for breakfast every morning. But what would be so wrong about having a bowl of, say, some homemade soup, or maybe a hamburger patty and some greens, or maybe some leftovers from the dinner the night before? We need to change this mindset, because we have to change the mindset that we have to have certain things for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And I bring this up because I think it's a very integral part to how we can incorporate healthy eating into a fast-paced lifestyle. It gives you more options. Options are good. We need more options. It'll also set you up better for success. So the other thing I want to mention real quick is that meals don't have to be gourmet in order to be nutritionally dense and very healthy. They can be actually quite simple. And this can be a huge time saver as well. So just a little earlier, I alluded to a traditional diet. But what is this exactly? Well, a traditional diet can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different cultures. And one characteristic, though, that defines almost all of them, regardless of their ethnicity or their geography, is that these foods were always whole, unrefined, and straight from nature. So they were prepared also to maximize digestibility. They were so nutrient dense that indigenous cultures were spared the problems of degenerative diseases when they consumed these foods. So it's very important to understand what these are. So back in the 1930s, as we've heard from other speakers, and we'll hear from Sally tomorrow, back in the 30s, Dr. Weston Price, he was a dentist and a nutritional anthropologist. He made it his life's mission to study people and cultures eating traditional foods. He also traveled around the world seeking societies who were isolated from civilization and modern foods to understand what it was that made them healthy. He observed that those living on their native diets had perfect teeth, they had wide, broad dental arches, they were free from disease, and they had really happy dispositions. But the moment that refined foods were incorporated into their diet, such as white sugar or flour, their health deteriorated pretty substantially. So compare the photos of the people on the left eating the modern diet versus those on the right eating their traditional diet. And look at their dispositions. It's kind of amazing, isn't it? So we're on our third generation of a deficient diet. And as a result, we're seeing about a 25% increase in infertility and a corresponding increase in chronic diseases, especially in our children. And Dr. Price predicted this back in the 30s. He believed that unless people started to incorporate more traditional foods into their diet, that we would have the ability to die off as a species. That's pretty scary. But our current infertility rate shows just how close we are to having this become a reality. And all of this is despite modern medicine's advances. So changing the mindset even further, I'm curious to find out how many of you are aware of some of the most common fallacies promoted by the media and our government and the medical field. Let's very quickly look at some of this misinformation. First, vegan and low-fat diets have been touted as being healthy, yet they are far from being health supportive. We all need fats to assimilate the minerals and the nutrients in our foods, especially the vitamin A and the D in milk. Fats are very crucial for everyone, but they're extremely crucial for mothers-to-be and for children for proper brain development. We've also been told to stay away from cholesterol, but cholesterol is actually an antioxidant, and it's needed to regenerate damaged cells and to give cells their structure. It's also needed to make all of our sex hormones, to convert sunshine to vitamin D, to make bile acids for fat digestion. Cholesterol is also the raw material that's needed to create neurotransmitters like serotonin. So for all of you or any of you out there suffering from a little depression, start eating more butter and eggs. We've also been told to stay away from saturated fats, yet they are needed in our diets to transport calcium into our bones. It's also used to help boost immunity, and the reason for that is because they're antiviral, antibacterial, and antifungal. We've also been told to stay away from the sun, but it's actually good for us. Vitamin D is protective against heart disease, from cancer, and it's crucial for bone health. And incidentally, the toxins in the sunscreens are actually more apt to cause us skin cancer than the actual rays from the sun. So it's absolutely amazing what information has been disseminated by the media and how gullible we've all become, isn't it? It's another reason to take control over our own health. So some comical relief for you. Check today's paper, hun. Are eggs now safe to eat, or should we continue to avoid them like the plague? Case in point, huh? Next. So continuing on with changing the mindset, why is shopping organic important? Well, before I get into this, let me just say that the organic standards are definitely not what they used to be. In Montana, the state that I currently reside in, we've actually have a newer standard called Montana Homegrown, which is actually a lot higher of standard than what our current standards are here, and it's also close to what organic used to be before the USDA got a hold of it. Nevertheless, we still should buy organic, and especially from a reputable source. They will have fewer pesticide residues, meaning less toxic load to the body. A healthier soil also means healthier food, and healthier food means a healthier body. Biodiversity is also really important for a variety of reasons. By growing a lot of variety of crops, the soil is going to be nourished. It's not going to be depleted. This results in a healthier food for us. It also provides a lot more varieties of plants, and the less need there will be for stronger and stronger pesticides to be used. Also, when you buy organic, you're ensured that you're eating foods that have never been genetically modified. Of course, this might change if Monsanto's GMO alfalfa is allowed to be grown. Have any of you heard about this that's going on? Yeah, this will pretty much fundamentally undermine the entire organic industry overnight. It's pretty scary, so let's pray this doesn't happen. So there's a lot of controversy that surrounds the topic of GMOs, but the bottom line is that by producing more crops, or producing these crops, we're manipulating nature in order to increase crop yields. But this actually has not been successful. And we're also doing it to make crops more resistant to pests, but the crops are more resistant to pesticides instead. So a little different story going on there. Numerous studies show that GM foods can contribute or can cause unfortunate side effects like stomach lesions in rats. But we're actually the rats in the study here because we have absolutely no idea what the true effects of genetic manipulation are on the ecosystem or on our bodies. It's a very scary and very serious issue. And one thing for sure is that practically all processed foods have some sort of GM ingredients in them. And currently, the FDA does not require them to be labeled on packages right now. So hopefully that changes soon as well. So why is shopping locally important? Well, it supports your local economy, obviously, instead of the larger agribusinesses like Monsanto, which, in my opinion, is always a very good idea. It also supports our local farmers and encourages them to stay in farming, which we desperately need. Without them, we have fewer choices for healthier and fresher foods. It also places a fewer demands on fossil fuels for the transportation of our foods. But from a nutritional standpoint, food begins to deteriorate from the moment of harvest to the moment of its consumption. So the quicker the food is eaten from the time that it has been harvested, the more nutrients it's going to have, and the better flavor and taste as well. So the last thing we need to do when changing our mindset is to recognize why cooking is so important. So when you cook things from scratch, when you cook things yourself from scratch, you know all the ingredients of the food that you're preparing. There's so much satisfaction that comes from identifying where each part of your meal came from. For example, who was the farmer that supplied the eggs for your souffle this morning? Where did you source your nitrate-free bacon from? Which farmer grew your vine-ripened tomatoes that you just bought from the farmer's market? It is so rewarding to be able to answer these questions each and every time you sit down for a meal. You become incredibly grateful for the amazing food that is nourishing you and for the abundance that Mother Nature has bestowed upon us. And may I remind each and every person here to take a look at civilization and our evolutionary past. It has always been about cooking. Our entire daily schedule revolved around the preparation of food, the gathering of food, the socializing, the eating it together. It was a time for connecting with people and our earth. And I have fond memories of being around my mom when she was in the kitchen every night preparing our meal, preparing our dinner for the evening. And it was a time for us to talk and sort of, talk about the day and sort of reconnect with one another. And I cherish these memories. And I don't think a lot of people have these memories of their childhood, and I feel very grateful that I do. We also never ate dinner unless all 6 of us family members were eating it together. And often, actually very often, this meant that we didn't eat until about 10 o'clock at night. But you know what? It was very important. It was very important for my mom to have this experience, to have all of us sitting down together. So look at how far we stayed from our traditional values and our meaningful social activities. I'd like to read you an excerpt from Sally Fallon's Nourishing Traditions book. I believe it beautifully summarizes the point that I'm trying to make here. So, quote, "If a woman could see the sparks of light going forth from her fingertips when she is cooking, and the substance of light that goes into the food she handles, she would be amazed to see how much of herself she charges into the meals that she prepares for her family and her friends. It's one of the most important and least understood activities of life, that the radiation and feeling that goes into the preparation of the food affects everyone who partakes of it, and that this activity should be unhurried, peaceful, and happy. It would be better that an individual not eat at all than to eat food that has been prepared under a feeling of anger, resentment, or depression. The substance of this life stream performing the service flows into the food that is eaten and actually becomes part of the energy of the receiver." So let's get started in making this transition, shall we? Next. So here we have some things that you're going to want to eliminate from your diet. The first items are partially hydrogenated fats and oils, such as margarine or Crisco or other spreads. And for those of us who have had mothers who grew up in the 50s, this is baking pies with Crisco. This is going to be a tough one to eliminate for them. God, it sure was with my mom. It took her 3 dang years to change from making pies with Crisco to pies with lard for the pie crust. She was so, oh my gosh, it took her forever. She was thinking that, she was known for making delicious pies. It was sort of her trademark. And she was very afraid that she would not be, that they wouldn't taste as good. But boy, was she wrong about that one. And she will now be the first to admit that her pies taste much better with lard. Anyway, she also finally understood that the problems of what I was trying to teach her for years, that manufactured fats, such as margarine and Crisco, have been hydrogenated in order to make them solid at room temperature. And this artificial process is what creates the trans fatty acids that we've all been hearing about. And unfortunately, the body doesn't know how to metabolize these trans fatty acids. They're actually quite damaging, and they can create a host of health problems that we're just now starting to see the results of. Also, pasteurized and homogenized milk should be avoided. When milk is pasteurized, it destroys the enzymes that naturally occur in the milk that allow most people to be able to digest the milk sugar lactose. And a lot of people are drinking skim or low-fat milk too. But what many people don't realize is that you can't absorb the calcium without the fat. We've also been told to eliminate cholesterol from our diets. But dietary cholesterol is actually quite harmless. It's only when cholesterol becomes oxidized that it becomes problematic and identified by the immune system. So these cholesterol oxides, is what they're called, can be found in a lot of processed foods, which contain the trans fatty acids. It's also found in a substance called non-fat milk solids. These solids are used to give body and sustenance to low-fat or non-fat dairy products. It can be found in processed milk, it can be found in processed cheeses, and in egg substitutes, such as egg beaters. Another thing to eliminate, monosodium glutamate, or MSG, which is a neurotoxin known to kill brain cells when ingested. MSG can be disguised as many things. Some of these things you can see on the back of packages. It's called hydrolyzed protein. It can also be found as citric acid, natural flavorings, natural spices, all these things that sound natural, but they're not. Also, eliminate vegetable oils such as canola, safflower, soybean, and corn from your diet. They are almost always genetically modified, but they also are very unhealthy, and we're going to get to those in just a second. Lastly, we want to eliminate high fructose corn syrup. I know Nancy Appleton talked a little bit about this yesterday. But the problem with fructose isn't, it really has nothing to do with the empty calories that we've been hearing about. It's a fact that fructose is actually a poison. And incidentally, there's absolutely no difference between it and ethanol. They are both made from fermenting sugar, and they are metabolized in the liver exactly the same way. According to Dr. Robert Lustig from UC San Francisco, 8 of the 12 symptoms of chronic ethanol exposure are exactly the same for chronic fructose exposure. So not only is high fructose corn syrup metabolically evil, it's also economically evil because it's dirt cheap. And it's found its way basically into everything, a lot of processed foods. In fact, I think there was some study done not too long ago where they looked at all of the commercial breads in a regular grocery store market and found that out of 32 of them, only 1 didn't have high fructose corn syrup in it. That is pretty alarming. So it's found in hamburger buns, in breads, in pretzels, barbecue sauces, ketchup, salad dressings, you name it. And the FDA isn't really touching this, which is why it's probably remained in our food supplies. To address this is going to admit to the world that our food is a problem. And this would be an absolute economic disaster. So fructose is essentially ethanol without the buzz. Next. So we've just looked at foods to eliminate from the diet. Let's now see some foods that we can include. So the first thing that we want to include is some high-quality, non-processed fats. And in the case of animal fats, we want to make sure that the animals have been grass-fed. This will ensure that the fats are going to have a lot of anti-inflammatory nutrients, such as the omega-3 fatty acids that we've been hearing a lot about. It'll also have conjugated linoleic acid and vitamins A and D. Full-fat dairy, we want to include this. And again, you cannot absorb the calcium without the fat. But also, if you culture your raw dairy, it will also provide you with an abundance of healthy probiotics, which is also a very good thing. We've already discussed the value of eating organic produce, but when you lacto ferment or culture your fruits and vegetables, you're also going to provide valuable enzymes to the meal. And animal protein, eaten as nature intended, will also provide the healthy fats like we discussed, but it's also important to note that you cannot, that with eating too much protein without the fat, it's actually going to damage the kidneys. So, you know, when I look at this, I go, gosh, you know, Mother Nature didn't provide us with chickens that lay only egg whites, nor did she give us chickens that only had skinless, boneless chicken breast meat. It's, you know, protein foods need to be consumed with their fats. Also, natural and unrefined sweeteners used in moderation can also provide some nutrients. For example, raw honey is very rich in enzymes. And lastly, Celtic sea salt. Salt is actually good if it's a good brand of Celtic sea salt. It provides all the full complex of minerals to the body, not just sodium chloride. So it's actually an important component of a meal. So I want to go into a little bit more detail about fats, because this is a crucial piece of our changing the mindset topic. It also happens to be the most hotly debated topic and confusing of food topics, as this cartoon illustrates. Okay. So we're going to get into a little bit of biochemistry here. It's not going to be too painful, I promise. But I think it's really necessary to look at the molecular makeup of these fats in order to understand which fats can affect health negatively and which ones positively. So the first fat we're going to talk about is saturated fat. Saturated fats are a complete molecule. What this means is that all of their carbons are bonded to the maximum number of hydrogen atoms seen here on this slide. So what this means is that they don't need additional hydrogen in order to complete their formation like other fatty acids do. Their hydrogen atoms are packed tightly together, which is what makes this fat solid at room temperature. This characteristic also makes it highly stable, so it can withstand high heat and for cooking and for frying, and it doesn't break down or oxidize very easily. So some examples of a saturated fat would be, of course, coconut oil, some butter, ghee, which is clarified butter, and tallow. Polyunsaturated fatty acids, on the other hand, are missing hydrogen atoms, making the molecules highly unstable. As you can see on this slide, the kinks in their tails here also mean that these fats also cannot pack very tightly together, and this is what makes vegetable oils liquid at room temperature. And what's important to understand here isn't the fact that these vegetable oils are liquid, but that polyunsaturates want to bond to anything and everything that they come into contact with. So this means anything like light or heat or oxygen. And they do this to become more stable. This is also what happens to destroy them so quickly. So it makes them very susceptible to oxidation. It causes free radical formation, which we've heard is not a good thing, because free radicals cause inflammation in the body, which is sort of the new theory behind what contributes to diabetes and heart disease and cancer. Polyunsaturates like canola, soy, corn oils, these are also very heavily processed. In order for the oil to be extracted from the seed, it has to be heated at very high temperatures. Furthermore, during processing, they're stripped of their natural antioxidants. So this naturally, of course, would protect them from oxidation, but they don't have that anymore. They're also refined, bleached, and deodorized in order to make them palatable for us to eat. And by the time they are purchased in a grocery store, they've already become rancid by the processing. So what makes it worse is that when oils are packaged in clear plastic bottles, it also allows light to pass through, creating even more oxidation. So this is why it's really important to always buy non-saturated fats in opaque, dark glass bottles, such as olive oil. And incidentally, olive oil is mostly monounsaturated, but in my opinion, it should not really be used for cooking, regardless of the temperature, because of this reason. So it's important to note that you can eat the best diet in the world, but if you cannot assimilate the nutrients in the food that you're eating, it's not really worth the expense or the effort. So digestibility is really, really crucial. So Dr. Price found that in each culture that he studied, that they all had special ways of preparing their foods that they consumed on a daily basis to promote really good digestion. We don't really do that here. Our modern culture has sort of forgotten how to do this. But cultures such as Korea, they have kimchi. Germany has sauerkraut, things like that. We just don't have this practice in our culture. And the other thing to bring up here as far as digestibility is plants have what are called nature's pesticides. And this is sort of an evolutionary defense mechanism that consists of thousands of natural toxins used to deter animals and humans from overpredation. And these toxins have been found to actually wreak havoc in the digestive tracts of humans. Nature's pesticides appear to be present in all plants. And although there are a few that are found only in one plant, 5 to 10% of a plant's total dry weight is made up of them. One of the toxins that we want to talk about today is phytic acid. It is present in beans and seeds, grains, and nuts. Phytates are also found a little bit in tubers and also in minute amounts in fruits and vegetables. And these phytates inhibit the ability of the digestive tract or the digestive enzymes to break down the protein. They also bind to minerals such as calcium and magnesium, iron and zinc, impairing bone growth and metabolism and causing a host of other problems. And what's really interesting here is that these foods did not evolve for our benefit. Our intestinal tracts actually lack the enzyme phytase to release the minerals from the phytate of these grains and legumes and nuts and seeds. But the good news is that these foods also contain the enzyme to release the minerals from them. All it takes is a little warm water and a little acid. For this reason, it's really important to soak grains and legumes before you eat them. It's been shown that by soaking grains and then germinating them and then grinding the sprouts and making bread, that one can break down 75% of the phytates within 10 hours. So more on digestibility. Cultured dairy products. Cultured dairy products are easier on digestion because the fermentation process helps to actually break down the lactose, which a lot of people have some problems with. Homemade yogurt and kefir are also amazing for populating the gut with really good probiotics. And actually, in a 1 cup serving of homemade yogurt or kefir, it's been shown to have 700 billion bacteria. Compared this with the professional brand of probiotic supplements out on the market that only have 25 to 50 billion. So it's pretty amazing. Other digestive aids are fermented beverages, which are a really great alternative to plain water and have an abundance of electrolytes in them. In the case of beet kvass, which is a lacto-fermented drink, this can also be a great liver tonic. And also, fermenting vegetables increases the nutrient content in the food. What's interesting is, for example, sauerkraut has 4 times more vitamin C than the cabbage that it came from. Homemade broth is also a really wonderful digestive aid. When you make it from scratch, it's going to be really rich in minerals and gelatin, which is really good for digestion, and collagen, which is really good for the joints. So what can you expect from this change in diet? Well, first off, your taste buds are going to change. You're going to have cravings that are going to disappear. Your blood sugar is going to stabilize, and you're going to have a heck of a lot more energy. You're also going to develop an awareness for foods that nourish you versus those that don't. You know, this absolutely happened to me. I was eating a very processed foods diet for many, many, many years. And I did this before I started learning why quality food was so important. And after I made that transition, I found that the usual refined foods that I'd been eating just didn't even do anything for me. It no longer drew me in. And I started to actually be kind of turned off by them. They kind of repulsed me. And I also found that I didn't need sweets after every meal either. I also no longer needed to rely on sweets for like a quick energy boost in the late afternoon. I was nourished. I didn't need any of that stuff anymore. And it's really amazing, but these changes, when you make this transition, these changes happen only within like about a week or 2. It's actually quite fast. The body responds really quickly when it's been giving the building blocks to thrive. So easy meal planning. So before I show you what a typical meal plan looks like, I want to discuss the importance of getting into a weekly rhythm, because I think that's a big stumbling block for a lot of people. And planning ahead is actually very essential. You know, make this stuff important. Make food as important as your weekly meetings or your workout routines. I assure you that if you do this, you're going to see some changes pretty quickly, and it's going to be good. Also, choose a day to plan for the upcoming week's meals. For example, I find for myself that Sunday is a perfect day for this. I reserve about 3 or 4 hours on a Sunday afternoon, make sure I get everything going. It sets up the week on a good note, reduces the stress of having to plan during the week when things can actually get a lot more hectic. Also, make sure you have all of the ingredients you need for the week's menu ahead of time, which sounds sort of like a common sense thing, but make a list and shop accordingly. This can be really, really important. Because you know as well as I do that when you get home late after a late meeting or a long day or whatever, and you go into the refrigerator to make something quick and you don't have a particular ingredient that you need, you're going to go straight for those Honey Nut Cheerios. Don't lie to me. I know you are. I did it. So don't let this happen to you. Set yourself up for success. Also, make large quantities of foods that you're used to eating the most of. Things like crispy nuts that are really good to have on hand. Fermented foods, condiments, salad dressings. These things can last for months. It's also not like you're going to have to make them every week because of that. So, let's face it, none of us have the time to make homemade mayonnaise every week. So there's also many things that you can do to make things in bulk and just to freeze for later use. Things like chicken and beef broths are really good for that. Soups, some stews, meatballs, a variety of dinner entrees. Those are really good for freezing. So just experiment and seek sort of what works for you. Also remember that it's a lot easier to make quick, nourishing meals and dinner especially if you're already ready beforehand. So, for example, when you have 5 minutes during the week, you could cut up some raw vegetables and stash them in a Ziploc bag to make your dinner prep go a lot easier. Or you could make broth on a Sunday afternoon, while you're cleaning the house or vacuuming or something like that. Then while you're making the chicken stock and while it's simmering, you could actually pull the meat from the bones and chop it up and make some chicken salad for Monday's lunch. So, be really efficient with your time. There are things you can do to cut down on the prep in the kitchen. So here we have several examples of why planning ahead is so useful. Say you got home one night late. Maybe your kids had soccer practice or you had an emergency meeting or something after work. But luckily for you, you've already prepared for nights like these. Maybe you made some extra beef stew over the weekend. You had a jar of fermented sauerkraut that was already made in the refrigerator. You had cut up some fresh vegetables the night before. Now all you need to do is cook up the vegetable real quick while you're heating up the stew, scoop up some sauerkraut on your plate, and dinner is ready in 10 minutes. Another example, say you hate getting up early in the morning, and as a result, you probably never eat breakfast, unless of course you consider Starbucks breakfast. So because you've planned ahead, maybe you made a quart of soaked oatmeal 2 nights before that, so then while you're showering, you can heat up the oatmeal on the stove, and breakfast is ready when you are. You're ready to run out the door. Also, if you work in an office, make sure that there is a toaster oven and a fridge available so that you don't need to buy your lunch every day. Keep a jar of trail mix handy, or maybe some homemade nut bars for some quick and nourishing snacks. This is also going to eliminate the temptation for when things get maybe you have a little bit of a dip in the late afternoon and you need some energy. Also, whether you work in an office or not, it's a really good idea to bring a portable cooler with you everywhere. I am never without it. If I have a meeting and I know that I'm going to the gym afterwards, and what I'll do is I'll pack a cooler beforehand because I know I'm not going to get an opportunity to eat. So in that cooler, I might have a hunk of raw cheese, I might have some crispy nuts, I might have some chicken salad that I'd made before with some homemade mayonnaise, maybe some slices of raw vegetables. This lunch only takes me 2 minutes to throw together. Even on airplane rides, like when I got here, 5 minutes? How's that possible? Wow, okay. Okay, I've totally lost my train of thought. Anyway, when I'm on an airplane, I'll pack a cooler, and that way I don't have to worry about eating nasty foods. So it's important to note also that when you plan ahead, the desire to grab convenience foods is really kind of a non-issue. You know that the food that you've got with you is something that you're going to be nourished by. So the goal is always to try and eliminate those situations where you're becoming desperate and you have to grab whatever convenience food you can find because you don't want to have some low blood sugar. Also, make sure that your cooking space is well organized and well equipped. So here are some substitutions that you're gonna want to embrace. And go ahead, next. So I actually have these on a list outside on my table, and since we're running a little bit short on time, I'm not gonna go through these. So we can talk about it at the table there. I can give you a handout as well. Next. So now you've got some time in your schedule allocated for cooking. Now it's time to, and you've stocked your pantry and your fridge with some nourishing foods. So now it's time to make some staples. The good first step is to start making some things from scratch that you've been used to buying in the past. Some things like that would be salad dressing, which you cannot find any good salad dressings out there in the health food stores. It's impossible. And they're really, really easy to make on your own. Homemade chicken, beef, or fish broths, also something that you cannot get good quality of out there in the stores, so make that on your own. Crispy nuts are far more delicious than raw nuts, and remember it's important to soak them in warm water and warm salted water to deactivate the enzyme inhibitors, and then dehydrate them at low temperatures to maintain their own enzymes. As far as fermented vegetables, there are a couple that are in the stores that are not pasteurized, but honestly, it's so easy to make it yourself. And with all the pounding that's required with sauerkraut, it's a great way to take out your hostility for a good cause. Also, mayonnaise. This is one condiment out there that's imperative to make from scratch. I believe the only one that's on the market now, and it's actually really hard to find, is from Wilderness Family Naturals. And you actually have to order it from them directly. But the good news is that homemade mayonnaise only takes about 5 minutes to make from scratch. And if it's fermented, it can last up to 2 months. Also, cultured dairy products like yogurt, I use those to soak my grains, make homemade cookies or some sourdough pancakes, some yogurt dough or crackers. Whey is also really great for activating fermentation, and you can just do that by letting raw milk sit out and separate for a couple days. Okay, so easy meal planning. So the sample meal plan that I have here is for my clients. I realize it's kind of hard to read it here, but my meal plans are always customized for my clients, depending on their likes or their dislikes, their food sensitivities or their allergies. And the page on the left shows sort of a bird's eye view of what a typical week's worth of meals would look like. It has a variety of meal options, all with a varying degree of time that's associated with making them. The page on the right shows what the what the portions would be for that individual, and also some prep tips on the side for planning ahead. And the complexity of your meal plan should reflect the amount of time that you have for food preparation. So this may sound like common sense, but I think this is where a lot of the stress comes from with cooking, is that people feel like they have to make something extravagant when they don't have a lot of time. So you can absolutely eat quick, nourishing meals, and you do not have to be a slave in the kitchen. So I always consider the goals and the time constraints of my clients when I'm developing these meal plans for them, but you should do the same for yourself as well. So let's go through some quick meal ideas. So we've all heard that breakfast is the most important meal of the day. Here are some ideas for nourishing breakfasts. And one thing to note is that if you have adrenal fatigue or blood sugar problems, make sure your breakfasts are lower in carbs and higher in protein and fats in the morning to be able to maintain better blood sugar balance. Also, if you're in an office and need to eat when you arrive to work, you can be creative. When I used to work for a corporation, I used to I brought an egg poacher to work, and I kept it in the office kitchen. And then I used their toaster oven for cooking bacon. And I had a homemade breakfast in 10 minutes at work. And I use this example to show you that anything is possible if you put your mind to it. So some quick breakfasts might include anything with eggs. My fallback breakfast is to have some source of protein like ham or sausage or bacon with lots of vegetables with butter. And you can eat this meal with or without a slice of sourdough bread. Homemade corned beef hash is yummy and can be made in very large quantities and frozen very easily for later use. Coconut milk or kefir smoothies with raw egg yolks, a little bit of fruit, maybe some coconut oil are very quick, and you can make that the night before. So that's an easy thing for the morning. Sprouted whole grain pancakes or gluten-free pecan pancakes. These can be delicious for a weekend treat. Homemade nut muffins can be made in 5 minutes, and they're made from scratch. You can have these with butter, some yogurt, and fruit, and this is great for snacks or for breakfast on the run. And also, like I said before, don't be afraid to have foods normally reserved for dinner for breakfast. You know, you can heat up leftovers. You can make a hamburger patty, make a quesadilla with some ground meat and greens. I always have soup. If I'm not having just protein and vegetables, I'll have a big thing of soup, and that's my breakfast. You know, you need to think outside the box a little bit. Again, when you think outside the box, you're going to have a lot more options. And FYI, sort of nothing on this list takes more than 15 minutes to prepare. It goes quick. So for lunches, I love making collard green wraps. I lightly steam some collards and cut off the stems and layer a few leaves, maybe use some homemade mayonnaise or hummus as my spread. Then I layer some deli meats on there, like roast beef or pastrami, some sliced avocado, some shredded carrots, things like that. Then I roll them into wraps into about a 1 inch in diameter. And I can make these ahead of time. They're a great gluten-free finger food. Also, homemade kebabs are really an easy finger food. You can use virtually any kind of meat and vegetables. You just broil the kebabs for about 5 to 10 minutes and then smother them with some homemade teriyaki sauce. Delicious. And you can eat them cold or bring them or make them hot, doesn't matter. Also, chicken or salmon salads are easy to make in large quantities, and you can have this with a handful of nuts or over a bed of salad greens. Lamb, chicken, pork, or beef meatballs are a great finger food, and they're easy to pack into a lunch and can be made in bulk or frozen. Chicken liver pate is a great way to get organ meats in, and frittatas don't have to be made for breakfast. You can have them for lunch too. I know, next, one more. So here we have broken down some dinner options according to their preparation time. Note how many options on this list for dinners can be made in 15 minutes or less. You can have lamb chops or burgers, pork chops, baked fish, grilled shrimp, pan-fried steaks, ground meat quesadillas, stir fries, or leftovers. All of these are very, very quick dinners. For those dinners that I listed on here that are more than 45 minutes, it's important to note that several dishes may take a lot of time to cook, but their preparation time is actually quite quick. So examples of these might be pot roasts or briskets, braised short ribs or braised lamb shanks, and stews. And the best thing about these two is that actually the longer they sit, the more their flavors become enhanced, and they're really quite wonderful leftovers. So the side dishes that I listed here should be pretty standard with every meal. Always have a green salad, a steamed or sauteed vegetable, some raw milk or a fermented beverage, and some cultured vegetables. And I've also listed some side dishes here that are optional. I personally find that I don't need a lot of starches every day if I have a good amount of animal protein and fats and vegetables. And I find that I don't need a lot, that I don't actually crave a lot of these carbs either because I'm satiated by these other foods. Of course, I recognize that everyone's biochemically different, but I just want to mention this because not having to prepare a starch at every meal actually can cut down on a lot of prep time. So here we have it, meal planning for a fast-paced lifestyle. I have to tell you that I did try and find a 30-second homemade meal to include here, but I failed. So I regret to tell you that I don't think it can be done, but I also want you to know that I think you'll agree that spending 10 to 15 minutes on a homemade prepared meal is actually not such a bad thing. I also want to recognize that many of you might be feeling that making things from scratch or soaking or sprouting or fermenting or all these other preparation methods that we talked about may seem kind of laborious to you. And at first, it's going to seem this way. I'm not going to deny that. It is very intimidating in the beginning. But soon enough, I swear, it's going to become second nature to you. And you know, I have a crazy schedule every day, yet I always find time to throw together a quick, nourishing meal. It's just not even an option for me to do otherwise. And I know what my body needs to thrive, and I know what my body needs to maintain its energy throughout the day. So let's put this whole thing into proper timing perspective here for a moment. So I absolutely guarantee that you're going to feel so good by eating from these principles that you're going to pick up extra time during the day that you didn't normally have available to you. So you're not going to need to be going to doctor's appointments or picking up prescription refills or taking your daily naps in order to get energy. You're also not going to have to stand in line for lunch every day or have to drive somewhere to get lunch every day. So by investing in some of these new habits, you're going to be incorporating a lot of positive changes. And this will absolutely result in a positive feedback because your body and your mind are going to feel so much better and you're going to have a ton of energy. So, you know, it worked for me, it works with all the clients that I work, and honestly, if this stuff didn't work and didn't produce results, I wouldn't be doing this line of work because I need to see results with people, and it does it for me. So, let's see. We're going to have to skip through some of these. So go, oh, I am? Okay. So apparently I'm out of time. So I'm going to be out in the booth out there, and I just want everyone to know that I do have offices here in Santa Monica, California, and in Missoula, Montana, and I work with clients over phone or in person or over Skype. So if you want to know more, come and see me out there. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Holly. You know, I tell you, this kind of stuff does work. Myself, for breakfast, I have very often just some raw milk, some organic eggs, maybe 3 of them, with some melted butter, and it almost looks like a soup, the butter. But I tell you, I love butter. You know, don't have to deprive yourself anymore of those things. And of course, I get the raw butter too. So it does work, what she's saying. And so, in fact, yesterday I thought, do I really want to even eat lunch, you know, since I'm full, you know? The fact that you don't get hungry when you eat the fats with some proteins is really the incredible thing that I never knew and no one ever talked about until I learned these things from Western Enterprise Foundation.